Good day and welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming. So for today's video, I'm actually going to go over two really important things for us to actually know about the game. And this is the start of my build series. So the first build that you're going to get from me is the Sword and Shield. Now these should progress a lot faster than the other videos I have. I haven't tried to do them for the reason which is most obvious. That's because it takes a ton of time to actually get a good feel to the game and understand what's going on. So let's talk about these as a one by one. Now, Sword and Shield is the first place I'm starting because you actually have 5 pieces of format to every team. You have a tank, you have 3 DPS, and from your DPS, one can be a mage style DPS dealer. And last but not least, you have your healer. Now, all 5 members are a critical part of team play. If you play in a team without a healer and a tank, it's going to be quite chaotic. It's going to be quite difficult to hold enemies in one place. It's also going to be a lot more deaths for you as damage dealers because generally damage dealers have a very low percentage health with a very high percentage of focus or strength or dexterity towards whatever it is that they are going to use. Now, obviously, I'm slightly off on where I was saying things just now, but that's just the basics of it. All right, so let's get into what is so important about the Sword and Shield formation. Sword and Shield form your tanks and your off tanks. Now, the difference between a fully fledged tank and an off tank is as follows. An off tank does heavy DPS and supports the role of assault player. He will, in the case of an off tank, either deploy one ability for Taunt, which is Defiant Stance, which is the only one you can use, as his trump card, or he will deploy a full Sword Master fitting. Now, the difference between the two is quite a big difference. The full Sword Master stance gives you a heavy amount of DPS. The full Defender stance gives you a heavy amount of damage to take in. It's one of the most underrated skills in terms of PvP. When you think about it, I'll just put it this way. If two fully fledged defenders have to fight each other, the fight can last up to 45 minutes. If two fully fledged DPS face each other, the fight won't even last more than 10 seconds. Right? So fully fledged DPS, that means they 100% out with heavy intelligence or heavy strength, and when they hit each other, their damage looks something like a third of their health with a single strike. Right? One third, 2/3, third, and it's all gone by the third strike. So it's that quickly for two DPS to wipe each other out. However, when it comes to a tank against the same class of DPS, the DPS will have to land 3 heavy strikes to break the defender's shield, and then they have to start doing DPS. The DPS doesn't last that long because obviously the heavy tanks generally deploy either shield bash or shield rush, which will knock you back or stun you. This here will then cause the whole fight to take a massive lapse. Once they deploy Defiant Stance on top of that, their shield is back up and you have to go through it all over again. 3 hits, you break. It'll take you about 2 to 3 minutes to actually break a heavy tank if you take them on in face-to-face combat. If you take them on in sideways combat, it can take a bit longer. With the assistance of healing potions, that fight will take a lot longer for the DPS to go down. However, a standard DPS versus defender will be a defender's win without the healing from any source, right? That's because naturally speaking, the defender heals off their subclass, and it's actually this perk right here. So let's go through the 3 abilities of a full-fledged defender. Then I'll go into the Sword Master. Now, defender is your pure tank. Pure tank is the one who you will take into expeditions. He'll hold off most of the enemies. You take him through elite zones. That is what you need. You need a pure tank. An off tank can be used, however, they generally have a lot less health in their pool. Their split up for experience will be about 30% to constitution. That will give them around a 6.5 to 7.5 constitution. Then they're going to go with 10 levels to dexterity. Then they're going to go with the last 20 levels to strength. This improves their assault class capabilities and it improves their ability to withstand some assaults in terms of actual combat. So that's how it works for the two. It also gives them a lot faster assaults than they would have if they just went with a pure strength build. That is how an off tank works. In terms of defender, you either go 40 levels full out into constitution or 60 levels full out into constitution. Now, a full constitution build has no strength and no ability to fight back. They will supplement that with food, so heavy strength foods, heavy dexterity foods will be used to actually improve these skills. Now, obviously, it isn't a massive increase to that capability. The weapon plus the off perks on your armor will help you. In terms of perks on armor for the two types of tanks, right? For the full-fledged tank that is 60 levels in, he will not focus on Constitution for that build. He already has all the Constitution in there. Constitution is his secondary perk on armor. He will look for it to be the lower of the two perks. So he's generally going to look for a lot of strength and a lot of dexterity. That is to improve his weapon flow in combat. And I'll explain all of that with this defender build. Now, the person who goes with 40 levels will look for Constitution as the primary so that he can raise up his defense to the 1,200, sorry, not 1,000, to the 12,000 or 13,000 mark for defense. So let's go into the defender. Alright, so let's start off with the first perk. The first perk that can be purchased is Shield Rush. Now, Shield Rush is the best perk for you to start off with. It is a damage increase modifier. It also has a knockback on your enemies. This will allow you to actually have some time to actually pull back your ability to block. So while they're away from you, you drop your defense completely, you wait for them to reapproach, and you pull up your block. In that 5 seconds or the 2 seconds, you've recovered 2 seconds worth of stamina. That can be a massive advantage to you. If you plan everything correctly with the correct sequence, you can actually do a lot more than what I'm talking about. And let's go through it. Now, each of your skills has a full tree below it. Now, let's go down to the second perk. This is a third level perk. That means after your third level is open, you can purchase this. And this is Improved Rush. On successful hit, all enemies within 5 meters are weakened 10% for 10 seconds. Weakened reduces damage. Now, this here means that your DPS and your other roles can actually take hits from enemies who have been shield rushed. That means they now take a 10% reduction in damage from them. That means they're only dealing 90% of their regular attacks. It is an improvement. People who would only survive 2 hits can now, who can only survive 1 hit, can now maybe survive up to a second hit. It gives you some time to heal. It gives you an ability to run away. It is a massive help in critical situations. Last but not least, Intimidating Rush. On successful hit, all enemies within 5 meters of you are slowed by 30% for 4 seconds. Slow reduces target's movement speed. Now, when you compile these together, reduced damage plus slow for a DPS means they can get in and do more damage before they are attacked. It also means if you plan this out correctly, you can have a massive ability opportunity. Things such as bleed assaults or increased damage abilities will help stacking with this, because with the reduced damage that they output, if they take more damage, you can really play this well. Now, this is where things will get a little bit difficult to explain, but depending on formats for teams, things will definitely improve for you moving forward. The next one that I'm going to talk about is Shield Bash. Shield Bash is another one of your defender capabilities. Shield Bash stuns enemies for 2 seconds at default. It will improve Taunt Gem capability if you have a Carnelian Gem equipped. So if you have a Carnelian Gem and you use the Shield Bash against an enemy, it is going to massively improve your taunting capability. It is an additional form of taunt for you. It will force enemies to gather around you. That is the way in which you use Shield Bash. Now let's jump down to the second part, because this is important. Causes greatly increased threat and deals 100% more damage. So by improving it, you now can pull threat from everybody around you. This gives you a second chance to help with threat pulling. Now, as you can see, this here has a 24-second recovery rate. 24 seconds is quite a nice amount of time, and if you can use it appropriately, you can hold threat for long enough in most dungeons, right? Dungeons, expeditions, whichever way you want to call it. So let's go down to the last one, Confusion Bash. You add an additional second to Confusion. Now, 3 seconds of Confusion is a good way for you to get away from a horde. So if someone is being heavily assaulted, deploying this against the horde will cause the threat to switch to the tank who is in defender. It will also cause you to have a 3 second break before they can assault again. Obviously, there are ways to pull threat away from a tank, and for that, there you need to understand the formations and what is needed for each type of player. I will explain that in a few seconds. Okay, moving on to the last of the perks, and that is Defiant Stance. Now, Defiant Stance is actually a taunt capability. It is also a heavy ability to increase your tanking ability. For 8 seconds, you will now have a 30% reduction of damage. A 30% reduction in damage when you're holding all the taunt is quite a big improvement. It lasts for 8 seconds out of its 42 seconds. Now, obviously, the Carnelian gem will give you 6 seconds of taunt, so you only have 6 seconds lasted on this. If you have a team where you have a healer as part of your formation, hold off using this taunt till after you've taken your first few blows. It will improve a lot for you if you can assist the healer in this way. Alright, the next part of this here is Final Countdown. If your health is above 50%, damage reduction is increased by 20%. So if you deploy this here, you're taking 50% damage. So this is a good way to hold out your shield for a few more seconds. And last but not least is Restoration. When Defiant Stance ends, heal 15% of your max health. So if you keep deploying Defiant Stance, you can heal 15% of your health quite quickly. For someone like me who has 13,000, that's 1,800, 1,900 health each time Defiant Stance ends. That is really extending the capability in a fight that's 2 hits from a heavy boss, especially if you have the right armor deployment. All of that will be discussed after I complete the rest of the class. Now, as part of the Defender, there are these sub-trees on the side that give you a lot of support for your physical play. So let's go off with the three-part over here. Sturdy Grip is a good way for you to reduce physical damage. It reduces 15% melee damage. Right on the other side, we have High Grip. This reduces range damage. And last but not least, we have Defensive Training, which will when blocking an attack, 10% fortify for 5 seconds. If you put these three together, that means that you will take a lot less damage overall. Fortify does have a good amount of improvement to you. 10% improved damage reduction to you. So if you deploy Defiant Stance plus Shield Rush, and you've been attacked directly, you will have somewhere in the range of 60% reduction to damage. Now, that is a massive thing for you as a player. A 30% reduction does improve your ability to stay in the fight. Now, let's go down to these two small ones, right? Gain 15% stamina when hitting a target with Shield Bash or Shield Rush. So by putting this on, this here is now going to extend your ability on your stamina. And considering that you have a 60% reduction for several seconds, this here will mean that you will be able to last even longer. I can actually last around 40 seconds in high damage dealing situations. So when damage dealing is being put on heavy to me as a tank, I can last up to 40 seconds. And that is thanks to these skills. The next one is the bottom recuperation. All incoming healing and regeneration increased by 10%. Putting this on makes it a lot easier for you to tank when your shield is broken. As a tank, your shield will be broken quite often. That is something that you have to get used to. Hate when that shows up. Just give me a second. Do this, and I'll be back in there. Okay, so last but not least, we have this final set on the side. Sturdy Shield grants an additional 15% physical armor. Now, this means that when your shield is bust, you have 15% more resistance. Right? That is to physical attacks, that's melee class assault. Elemental resistance reduces damage from all magical types by 10%. By having a shield in your hand, you're going to take 10% less burn, 10% less poison, 10% less um, elemental type damage. That's lightning, void strikes, whatever it is that's chaining against you. Alright, the next thing is one with the shield. When you block with a shield, all sword and shield cooldowns are reduced by 1%. In heavy situations, right? As you can see, this is a 42.6-second cooldown. If you are in a heavy situation where you have 5 or 6 enemies that are hitting you repeatedly, if you pull aggro to yourself with the taunt, remember you have 6 seconds of their assault coming at you. This here will improve your ability to redeploy these skills a lot sooner. This here is every 19 seconds. This here is every 24 seconds, and this is every 43 seconds basically. So if you count that up and you have this pulling down that cooldown for you, you really can hold the taunt for a lot longer using this. If 6 enemies hit you in a continuous strike for 3 seconds, right? Let's say that they can get off 1 hit every second. That's 3 times 6, that's 18% reduction to all of these cooldowns. There isn't such a major one, but obviously that's just holding it with Shield Bash. And then following that to make, sorry, not Shield Bash, with, no, that is Shield Bash. And then following that up with the Defiant Stance to pull all the aggro again. That's going to last for 6 seconds. And as I said, with 1 second apiece, that is a total of 6 volleys at 6, that's 36 plus the total of 18. You get a 50% reduction. That is half this time. That is a 23-second cooldown. That is a 12-second cooldown, and that is a whopping 9-second cooldown. So by doing this here, you're really holding on to that ability as a tank, and you can redeploy quite quickly. Now, here is where the problem comes with the heavy tank, and that is in the defender build, and that is how you place yourself as their team. Your healer is not going to reduce their threat. Your healer's whole idea is to keep the healing as heavy as possible. There are 2 other roles in this team who are not going to worry about their threat so much, and that is going to be your primary tank is going to hold all the threat, obviously, right? So your healer and your tank hold all the threat, and the last person who is going to pull threat, who is also in that same class, is your mage. Now, depending on how you set up your mage and what your mage does to reduce the effects of their threat generation, this here is something which is very important. So to reduce your threat generation, you have to use carnelian gems in your armor slots. So there is a massive reduction to you as a mage on the front line. It's going to cause you to pull down that ability of yours um, to deal elemental type damage. It is something that a lot of people wouldn't want to do. It can reduce the amount of assault you can actually put out. So here is the idea for you as a mage. A carnelian gem on your fire staff or your void gauntlet or your ice gauntlet. I'm not so sure about the void gauntlet or ice gauntlet. The other thing you could do is actually increase your weapons damage greatly. So when you deploy your special skills, you will actually cause taunting on them naturally by increasing your physical damage. Now, the whole idea behind that is actually to save the healer. The healer who is pushing out the most amount of heal is actually trying to save the tank in the center. When this is done, all of these skills are needed to pull back that heavy horde of enemies. As a result, the mage will drift closer to the tank in the center and he will deploy his heavy assaults. That means his Q, R, and F attacks are going to be deployed to force the aggression to come closer towards the tank. At this point, the tank will generally deploy Defiant Stance, and that is how you actually hold off the assault. Now, obviously, as you can see, Defiant Stance has a massive cooldown. So this here doesn't work every single time, which is why a mage requires a emergency plan, which will be the Ice Gauntlet's Ice Shroud. That will hold out on assaults for a few seconds, giving the tank some time to actually recover these abilities and actually pull assault. Now, as part of these side assaults, was the final blow, which I didn't talk about. This here generates 15% threat for 3 seconds on every 3 light assaults. Last but not least was the defensive formation, which improves everybody's defense by 30% in a 2-meter radius around the tank. Now, this is important for your close range melee. I'll explain the particular reason for this here when it comes to the next part of the formation. Okay, so the mage is going to pull everything close. The tank is going to do everything he can in the form of 3 light blows as fast as possible to pull all the assault back towards him. At this point, all the enemies should deviate back towards the tank, and everything should be fine in the front line of assault. Okay, moving on to the next part, your DPS. You have 2 types of DPS left in a standard formation. The mage is an optional to protect your healer. The mage does a significant amount of damage while the healer does a significant amount of healing. That is their whole particular purpose in the team formations. But please bear with this. This is where things get a bit confusing. You can't swap out the mage for a melee DPS dealer. Now, the melee DPS dealer in this form is actually going to hold 2 weapons: a close range crowd control weapon and a long range damage dealing weapon. So it's either going to be a bow, an arrow, or a hatchet. Those are the 3 that they can deploy to actually have a good formation with the healer. Alright, now the close range melee damage dealer is going to deploy a secondary crowd control weapon. So your primary is going to be a heavy melee weapon, rapier, or a spear. One of the 2 will do a significant amount of close range damage, and then deploying the second range assault is actually to hold off the damage when they break the tank's shield. Because as I said, the tank shield does break. I can last 42 seconds in heavy combat before I will go down. And by going down, I mean my tank is broken for the first time. I take heavy damage. By the time I get back up, I'm only 50% stamina. That means I don't have the same 40 seconds before I break again. I'm at least 20 seconds. On the second break, I'm already down to less than a third health if the healer hasn't healed me. And by the time the next one comes through, is another 20 seconds. If your close range melee DPS deploys something like a hammer with stun, that gives me 6 seconds to recover, which would increase my ability to heal to somewhere near 30 to 40 second secondary stance before I go down for a second time. It gives the healer a chance to actually deploy more healing to me as a tank, and overall that is the whole idea behind this formation. Okay, let's move on to the last person, who is the odd one out. It is the range DPS dealer. Range DPS dealer is generally a crowd control and range DPS dealer. They do not form around with the healer. They generally don't receive healing, they're in light armor, and they are very squishy. As a result, they will not engage in too much of close range combat. They will employ some type of crowd control that will keep enemies away from them. So something with a heavy pushback is a good example for them. So they will deploy something like a great axe or a warhammer. That is their primary DPS weapons. And part of this formation will also have their secondary DPS weapon being a musket, a bow, or a hatchet once again. This is going to be what they're going to use most of the time, even though it's their secondary weapon. However, their primary weapon is used to stun any enemies that have deviated from the mage. Now, this is helping their entire formation in the 3 sets of threat. The mage is there to pull it off the healer. Then he takes it to the center, where this middle DPS actually pulls everybody off him with a stun. And the defender then attracts everybody back towards him right in the center, forming a nice chain of command. Now, with the skills of this 30% reduction in damage, it means that for your armor as a melee DPS, you do not have to put on damage reduction. So physical damage reduction is not needed for you. What can you do? You can increase your actual physical DPS. Now, increasing your physical DPS will definitely help big time. The mid-range DPS will generally try and cool down his threat holding because you do not want to hold threat as the mid-range DPS. You will deploy multiple carnelian gems in your armor slots. Now, depending on how you form up your team, your mage may actually do the same thing with carnelian gems in their armor slots to reduce their threat generation. That's if their threat generates way too quickly off their basic assaults and pulls everything off the tank. You might want to actually pull off a few carnelian gems into your slots. And that's only in armor. In weapons, you'll keep your damage higher. That's just the way that it goes. Now, there is the overall perspective of the defender. As I said, you do have two types of defender, and you have multiple formations that form around the sword and shield. One of the formations is called the Paladin. Paladin is a healing tank. It's actually used um, to pull more aggro on yourself, and you generally will hold about 50 to 60 seconds worth of damage on yourself per breakage in your shield. You also will have a lot longer to survive. You will survive somewhere in the range of 2.5 to 3 minutes in heavy combat situations due to your healing circle and your increased amount of aggression holding. Okay, so let's talk about the next aspect of Sword and Shield, and that is Sword Master. Sword Master is what you would call your off tank. They can tank slightly because of the addition of Defiant Stance if they're going to do it. Otherwise, they're just a pure DPS build with the ability to hold off some damage to themselves. Now, I'm not going to discuss it as heavy as Defender because this is an off-tank build. It's also an off-DPS build. So it's not a primary DPS build. It's not going to hold the same amount of force for you as a player that you would like as a DPS. You're much better off with a rapier or a spear. And that's just the way that it looks from the onset. Whirling Blade does 145% damage to all foes within 2 meters. The second one, Whirling Blade, inflicts a 5% render. For 10% render, reduces target's defense. Right? And last but not least, Tactical Strike. Whirling Blade reduces its own cooldown by 10% for each enemy hit. So if you're in a massive situation, and say for example you're the DPS on the front line, you can use Whirling Blade to actually assist the defender. That is one of the uses of the Sword Master. As I said, it's a DPS. Close range might not be the best, but it can really help big time, especially with the render for 10 seconds. 10 seconds of reduced defense, that means you can do more damage to them. If paired up with the shield bash, that will mean you can do a massive amount of damage while taking a lot less damage next to your tank. Last but not least is the Tactical Strike ability, which is reducing 10% of your cooldowns. That is a massive advantage to you. Okay, let's go on to the second one, which is Reverse Stab. Reverse Stab, as you can see, is a 175% weapon damage. If you pair it up with Whirling Blade, which is completely mastered, so Whirling Blade first, followed by a backstab, you will do tremendous amounts of DPS. Following this, you have Unstoppable Stab. Reverse Stab now has Grit. Grit prevents you from being staggered, so you can't be pushed back, staggered, or stopped when you have engaged this ability. And last but not least, Tactician reduces cooldowns by 25%. So all your cooldowns are reduced by 25%. If you had Whirling Blade run through 6 enemies, that's a 60% cooldown. It doesn't take that long, as you can see. And when you employ this, it's a 25%. So 60 plus 25, that's an 85% cooldown. The reason why I'm going with 6 is that's generally the amount of enemies you find in heavy situations. And as I said, you can use this here as a quick ability cooldown or a quick ability to assist your tank in critical situations. Last but not least, we have Leaping Strike. Leaping Strike is a 6 meter, 150% damage deal. The second one, if you hit foes below 30%, deal 50% more damage. And looking at that, that's a double your damage basically instantly. And last but not least, if Leaping Strike hits a target in the back, it inflicts a 50% slow for 8 seconds. So the slow being deployed with the slow that's being deployed over here, everything being put together, you can see why it's an effective assistant to your tank. It's an off-tank build for that particular purpose. You switch to a temporary tank build, you that You switch to a temporary tank build and you hold off that DPS, you inflict extra DPS. You have a lot up your sleeve just using this. There's also another bonus to it, and that is the leadership buff. It grants all group members an increase by 10% to damage. Right, so 10% increased damage. So everybody within the buff range is going to have 10% increased damage. 10% damage is a big improvement to everybody. That means your tank is going to be able to push out a little bit more DPS. You've reduced the defense by 5%. He's reduced their damage dealing by 40%, just generally speaking, with this tree down here. And that is a big help to you. Now let's look at the sides. Critical precision on critical, gain 20% haste for 5 seconds, improves your ability to move. Counter attack, when you block an attack, gain 3% empowered for 5 seconds. As you can see, this is a massive increase in damage. So you can do this here up to 5 times. So if you have the 6 enemies jump into the line where your tank is, take the full 6 volleys, that is going to improve you by 15%. 15% plus everything being added together, you can do quite a bit of damage. Alright, Free Justice, successfully hitting with a heavy attack causes you to lose 1 debuff. Right, so every heavy attack pulls off debuffs. You can heavy strike and that will make sure that you have less bleed or less poison damage. Quite a good one to use. Successful heavy attacks grant you 30% in power for 5 seconds. So if you do this here correctly, you're going to take on those heavy hits, do 1 heavy assault, strike, and then you're going to keep hitting as hard as you can with either the backstab or the leaping strike. Last but not least, you have Achilles heel. The final attack in your light attacks chain inflicts a 20% slow for 2 seconds. Now this is only used to help you escape from the line of damage. Okay, precision. Sword and shield critical strike chance increased by 10%. That is a good thing for you. 10% extra critical damage is going to make a big difference. Move 33% faster while blocking. That is also a massive improvement for you. Deal 10% more damage to slowed foes. So if you are in conjunction with a defender and you have this ability, you're going to slice enemies who are slowed. And last but not least, while health is full, deal 15% more damage. So a perfect first strike attack for you with the shield. Then you go into your block and you improve everything as you go along. If you use this here correctly, it can be a big assistance to a tank. It is a massive assistance to a team. However, this isn't the ideal situation for you. As I said, this here has to be paired in conjunction with a perfect defending tank. This is an assault class capability, making you an off tank DPS, right? So that is where you're sitting as a DPS dealer with Swordmaster. Now overall, let me just show you 1 or 2 things. Here is another one of them. Deal 10% bonus damage for each debuff on your target. Now as you can see, this is just for you as a single player. It isn't helping your entire team. Let's look at this. Deal 25% increased damage while stamina is full. Not really helping you as a team. And as you can see, that's why that was such an important one. The next one with a massive help to the team, I believe, is Life Staff. Let's see what's this here at the bottom. When you heal an ally below 50% health, they are healed for 30% more. As you can see, quick and easy, good one for them to have. This subclass actually requires a massive reform, healing and protector. If you go full healing, as you can see with this one, Splash of Light, you and all group members within 100 meters are healed for 60% weapon damage. I don't use it, but I have it available. It's a big waste of skills. I have to sort that out later. I might actually just reset it now, but nonetheless, as you can see, these really help you out as a team. These are team-based weapon advantages for you with the sword and shield. That is one of the reasons why they are so important for team play. Now, please note some things about tanks. Tanks are highly ineffective in fighting. They take extremely long to do damage, so they are no good in using them to deal DPS. If you decide to use your tank as the primary DPS dealer in an elite zone, you are going to be severely slow, especially in the higher level areas where they use potions. They are going to continuously use potions, and the fights can take extremely long with just a healer and a tank formation. It is for that reason that it is better for you to play a Paladin and DPS instead of a tank and healer in those situations. Remember that tank, healer, and a third person are required when playing those formations. You also have to be very careful about your gem situations on your armor. Example, a tank is going to try and pull off as much physical resistance as possible. There's going to be pearls or diamonds into their armor. So that's going to be about it from me for this video. I hope that you all do enjoy it and catch you all in the next one.